Once you settle on a thumbnail design that you want to start taking to finish as your finished design on your box project, I'm going to walk you through the various steps you can do in here. And I'm going to use, as I started with the demo, I'm using the Wheaties box here. The very first thing I want you to do is create a new logo for this. And one of the questions you're going to run into as you're working on this is, if you're doing a rebrand on an existing product, is this something where you want to go a totally different direction, or do you want to just do a modern take or a update to the look on here? And so for a lot of you, you're probably going to want to just create your own new look that looks nothing like the old packaging. For the demo here, I chose Wheaties, which has been around for about 100 years. And there's certain things that have been standard. You've got the orange, which is really kind of their branding color. You've got this sans serif type that's kind of in perspective on here, and then they've always featured athletes on here. Now, I don't want to just do a refresh of all their existing branding. I want to try and make it a little bit new. What I think I'm going to do, just because they've kind of owned this orange color for 100 years, I think to change that would be probably too great a change on here. So what I am going to do is come up with a different look for the type on here. So this is the font they've used for years. It's slightly distorted on here. What I'm going to do is come up with a whole new logo, and I'd like you to create a new logo for the brand as well. Don't just reuse the one that's already on the box. And because they tend to really focus on athletes and athletics, even if most of the people who eat Wheaties don't actually are basically couch potatoes, I'm going to really lean into this idea of athletes and athletics. And so instead of the sans serif type, what I'm going to do is do a font that looks kind of like an old, kind of like a lot of the sports teams logos. So I'm going to change the font here. And I happen to have gone online and found a font that I think might work for this. So let me find it down here in the K's. All right, so again, what I'm trying to do is kind of mimic a lot of the type that you see on baseball jerseys, basketball jerseys, hockey jerseys, kind of that typical look in here. So I'm going to start with this now. I always advise you guys to customize type where possible so you're not just using a font, and I'll get to that in a minute. One thing I want to do is add in one of those swooshes that you see underneath here, and part of the reason I chose this font is it actually has that as part of the font. So it may be this version of the font or another. What I'm going to do is put a cursor after the S here, and then I'm going to come up here under type and open glyphs. And if I open this up, it is not this version of the font. Let me copy this. There is another version of this font that has the swashes. So let me go find it. I just saw it. Where'd it go? There it is. So this is slightly different, but the reason I did that is this will have all the swashes on it. So I'm going to put my cursor back here and then come down here, and you can see, it's a little hard to see. There's all these various swashes. They're all different lengths in here. If I double click on it, and I just kind of guess, that ends up being kind of the right length on here. But here's the deal. I can close this now that I have that. I kind of much prefer this W from the first font, so we'll get rid of this. And I'll replace this. So here's how I'm starting with this. Now, you don't have to use fonts exactly the way you find them in here, and I'll show you what I mean by that. So what I'm going to do is take this font. If it's a font you haven't used before or haven't used often, what I do is before I outline everything, I'm going to just put a copy up here on the pasteboard. And the reason is, once I outline this, I'm not going to know what font it is, and then if I have to go back and find it, as long as I have a version of up here that still has the font name on it, and because I use two versions of it, if I highlight it, you can see there's the name of the font. But here's the one I'm going to customize. So I'm going to take this font, under type, I'm going to go ahead and create outlines with it. And when you do that, you can see it's all vectors now. It's no longer a font. When I select this, there's no name of the font at the top. And whenever you outline type, it's going to be all grouped. So I'm going to ungroup it. And now what I'm going to do, I'm going to play around with this a little bit. I really don't want... I want to have the angle of the W kind of mimic the same stroke on the other letters here. And maybe I don't have it linked because then it starts to be hard to read the H in here. Here is my swash under here. I really don't want it crashing into the W. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to move it out to about where I want it. And then I'm going to use the lasso tool here, if I can find it somewhere here. There it is. I'm going to grab all these points. And then I'm going to just use the arrows on my keyboard to shorten my swash up a little bit and get it to where I want it. And the other thing on here, it's a little bit thicker than I think I want it to be on here. So I'm going to go ahead and just grab these points. Now it's getting a little lumpy over there, but I like that thickness. So I'll go in here and adjust this a little bit with my... This is where understanding how to use the pen tool and working with all these points really comes in handy. And I think I'm going to actually... Let's raise these up a little bit too. And let's see, got another lump in here. So we'll kind of straighten this out. And I just want to get as smooth a curve as I have in there. And the last thing I'm going to do, I'm going to copy this. I want to keep a copy where I haven't distorted it or done anything, because what I want to do now is look at some options. Let's go ahead and group this. And I just want to see some of my options here. If I come up here under effect to the warp, one of the things I'm thinking of is maybe the flag effect here. That might be a little too much. It kind of distorts the type a little too much, so I'm not going to do that. I think what I'm going to do is just actually rotate this. But before I do that, one other thing I'm seeing here that I can do to customize this, I'm going to grab the crossbar on my T here and kind of move it out more that way. And then let's see if I can move my dot on my I. I'm going to move it up and over just a little bit so it wasn't touching on the T quite as much. And let's see. Once I do that, let's see, does that look good? No, that looks stupid. So I'm going to play around with placement on here. That looks pretty good. Or what would this look like? No, I don't think that looks good. I'm going to leave this as it is. But I don't want it straight on my Wheaties box. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and make another copy of this. Here's my original that I did. Here's with the extended T. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to try one of two things. I'm going to see what it looks like if I shear it, almost make it an ital look. That doesn't look too bad. And let's see another option. I can get rid of this since I'm not using it. The other thing I was thinking of is just rotating it and see what that works. That actually looks pretty good. I don't mind this one, but I think this one's a little cleaner on here. So once I get typed the way I want it, I'm going to go ahead and just save this off. And I'm going to keep it as an Illustrator file for now. Let me see where I put the demos in here. This is just my internal file, so I'm just going to call it Wheaties, and I may make changes, so I'll call it 01 for now and go ahead and save it. And then what we can do is start talking about how we can work with imagery, because as I mentioned, I still want to keep feature athletes on the cover. That's really what they're known for. but I just want to give it more of a updated look with my new logo that I'm putting on here. So now that I've got a version of the type I like, I'm going to talk about working with images.